The 2026 World Cup has officially begun. The stadium lights are shining brightly. Tens of thousands of fans are pouring into the stands. Billions of people around the world are preparing to watch the biggest football tournament on the planet. Everything we see on our screens looks perfect. The lush green pitches, the carefully choreographed opening ceremonies, FIFA officials appearing with confident smiles at every turn. But behind that polished image, a very different story is unfolding. While FIFA insists this will be the greatest World Cup in history, many hotels across the United States are facing unexpectedly quiet hallways. While millions of supporters eagerly await the tournament, many fans remain stuck outside the borders because of visa complications. While the World Cup was preparing to kick off, more than 1 billion people in India were at one point facing the possibility of being unable to watch a single match. And perhaps most remarkably, just weeks before the opening game, a host city in the United States reportedly threatened to cancel its entire World Cup schedule over an unpaid $8 million funding dispute. This is the story behind the 2026 World Cup. A story that FIFA may not want you to know. To understand why these issues have become so controversial, we first need to look at what FIFA promised the world before the 2026 World Cup. For years, FIFA promoted this tournament as the biggest World Cup in history. FIFA President Gianni Infantino stated that the competition would generate around $30 billion in economic value and bring a massive wave of visitors to host cities across North America. Those promises created enormous expectations among local governments and businesses. Hotels hired additional staff. Businesses expanded their operations. Many accommodation providers reserved thousands of rooms in anticipation of an international tourism boom. Everyone believed the World Cup would become an economic boost unlike anything they had experienced before. But as the opening day drew closer, reality began to paint a different picture. International visitor numbers did not rise as many had expected. Several host cities failed to experience the tourism surge that had been widely predicted. And one by one, problems involving hotels, visas, and broadcasting rights started to emerge. That raises a much bigger question. Hotel expectations turn into disappointment. If there was one industry that placed the highest hopes on the 2026 World Cup, it was the hotel industry. For years, hotels and host cities prepared for the wave of international visitors that FIFA had promised. They hired additional staff. They upgraded their facilities. They held back thousands of rooms in anticipation of a tourism boom unlike anything they had seen before. But the reality turned out to be very different. A recent survey found that nearly 80% of hotels in host cities reported booking levels below expectations. In Kansas City, that figure reportedly climbed to nearly 90%. Instead of fully booked properties, many hotels have been dealing with quiet hallways and empty rooms. Instead of the busiest summer in their history, many businesses are experiencing conditions that feel little different from a normal tourist season. What makes this situation even more striking is that many observers do not blame the hotels themselves. Some industry experts argue that expectations surrounding international visitor numbers were set far too high. At the same time, many football fans from around the world have faced growing difficulties when trying to travel to the United States. And that is where another problem begins to emerge. A problem that could have an even greater impact on the atmosphere of the World Cup itself. The visa crisis. The visa crisis, when fans are left outside the game. But the bigger problem goes far beyond hotels. It involves the very people who make the World Cup what it is. The World Cup is not just about football. It is about the flags, the songs, and the supporters who travel thousands of miles to stand behind their national teams. Yet for many fans, that journey has become increasingly difficult at the 2026 World Cup. Supporters from countries such as Senegal, Ivory Coast, Iran, and Haiti have faced strict entry requirements and immigration hurdles. Several other nations, including Brazil, Morocco, Algeria, and Colombia, have also encountered visa processes that proved more complicated than many expected. As a result, some trips have been canceled. Some supporter groups have decided to stay home. Others have already purchased tickets but remain uncertain about whether they will actually be able to enter the United States. The real concern is not simply the possibility of empty seats. The real concern is the atmosphere that makes the World Cup unlike any other sporting event in the world. International supporters bring the color, emotion, and passion that define the tournament. They create the scenes that millions of viewers remember for years. And when thousands of dedicated fans are left stuck outside the border, an uncomfortable question begins to emerge. How special can a World Cup truly feel if some of its most passionate supporters cannot be part of it? While fans in many countries struggled to reach the stadiums, another crisis was unfolding on television screens. Just 10 days before the opening match, India still did not have a broadcaster for the 2026 World Cup. That sounds almost unbelievable. India is a country of more than 1.4 billion people and one of the fastest-growing football markets in the world. Tens of millions of viewers follow every World Cup. Yet, this time, they were facing the possibility of being unable to watch the tournament at all. The reported cause was a dispute over broadcasting rights. FIFA initially demanded a price that many considered too high. Major media companies in India refused to agree to the terms. Negotiations dragged on. Days passed. The opening match drew closer. Yet no agreement had been signed. Eventually, a new deal was reached at the last possible moment. The matches would still be broadcast, but the episode exposed a much larger issue. Even in one of the world's most important media markets, FIFA encountered significant difficulties selling World Cup broadcasting rights. And if that could happen in India, the situation in China becomes even more noteworthy. That is where the next chapter of this story begins. China, the biggest market still surrounded by questions. If India forced FIFA into a race against time, China raised a very different question. A question about the true global appeal of the 2026 World Cup. During the 2022 World Cup, China accounted for nearly half of all global digital viewership. It is an enormous market, one that every major sporting event wants to reach. Yet as the 2026 World Cup approached, broadcasting negotiations in China remained unresolved. FIFA confirmed that discussions were still ongoing, but declined to provide further details. That surprised many observers. Normally, the most important media markets are secured long before a tournament begins. The fact that a market as significant as China had still not finalized key agreements so close to kickoff suggested that FIFA was facing more challenges than many had expected. For an organization that has spent years promoting the tournament as the biggest World Cup ever, those questions inevitably attracted attention. And while FIFA continued working through broadcasting issues, another crisis was beginning to unfold inside the United States. This time, the problem was not about television audiences. It was not about international supporters. It was about money. And that financial dispute would bring one host city into direct conflict with the World Cup itself. As debates over hotels, visas, and broadcasting rights continued to grow, another unexpected problem emerged inside the United States. Foxborough, the city connected to Gillette Stadium, which is scheduled to host 7 World Cup matches, found itself facing a financial crisis. The issue centered on $7.8 million. That funding was needed to cover security, police operations, and other organizational costs throughout the tournament. At first glance, it did not seem like a significant amount for an event that FIFA has valued in the tens of billions of dollars. Yet the money was not released on time. Meetings followed one after another. Disagreements began to surface. Then something few people expected happened. Local officials warned that permits for hosting World Cup activities could be affected if the funding issue was not resolved. In other words, World Cup matches faced the possibility of disruption because of a shortfall of less than $8 million. Eventually, a last-minute agreement was reached and the crisis was resolved. The matches remained on schedule. But the episode left behind an uncomfortable image. A tournament promoted as the biggest World Cup in history had, at one point, been threatened by a relatively small amount of money compared to the scale of the event itself. And Foxborough was not the only place experiencing concerns. Philadelphia was beginning to show warning signs of its own. While Foxborough was worried about funding, Philadelphia found itself dealing with a very different problem. Thousands of hotel rooms that had previously been reserved by FIFA were suddenly released back onto the market. Very little explanation was provided. Speculation quickly followed. Was there a security concern? Had there been a change in tournament planning? FIFA maintained that the move was simply a normal operational adjustment, but the impact was immediately noticeable. The supply of available hotel rooms increased. Room prices began to fall. And that happened at a time when many hotels were already disappointed by visitor numbers that were lower than expected. For businesses that had spent years preparing for a tourism boom, the development raised even more questions. It added to a growing sense that the 2026 World Cup was not unfolding in the way many people had originally imagined. On their own, each of these stories might seem like an isolated issue, but when all the pieces are placed together, a very different picture begins to emerge. A picture that goes far beyond hotels, visas, or broadcasting deals. A picture that raises broader questions about expectations, planning, and the reality behind the biggest World Cup ever staged. When the opening whistle blows, most fans will focus on the football. They will remember the spectacular goals, the incredible saves, the emotional moments that become part of World Cup history. And on the pitch, the 2026 World Cup may still prove to be an extraordinary tournament. But beyond the stadium lights, a very different story has been unfolding. Hotels waiting for visitors who never arrived. Supporters struggling with visa barriers. Broadcasting negotiations that stretched dangerously close to kickoff. And financial disputes that emerged in host cities themselves. Taken together, these issues reveal a simple reality. Hosting the biggest World Cup in history is far more complicated than the vision FIFA spent years promoting. Perhaps the biggest question right now is not which nation will lift the trophy. The bigger question is whether the 2026 World Cup will truly become the greatest World Cup in history, as FIFA promised. The answer will only come once the tournament is over. For now, I would like to hear your thoughts. Do you believe these behind-the-scenes issues could affect the overall success of the 2026 World Cup? Leave your opinion in the comments below. I read every comment, and I would love to hear your perspective on this debate.